They told me the summons was a formality. That is the word the Merath Cartel used in the official dispatch. Formality. The convocation would assemble. The compliance register would be opened. Earth's name would be read from the list, and the delegation seated across the floor would acknowledge it. One word from a human mouth, acknowledged, and the matter of our 12-year absence from galactic commerce would be resolved in the cartel's favor, with all the legal weight of a subordinate trading entity accepting its proper classification. I had been recalled from the outer survey posts to attend. My predecessor in this role, Ambassador Sarah Voss, had negotiated the original treaty terms before the cartel moved to have us stricken from the active partner roles. That was 12 years ago. Voss had walked out of this same hall without signing. The cartel had marked the walkout as a concession of status, reclassified Earth as a dormant account, and waited for hunger or desperation to bring us back to the table on worse terms. They were not wrong that we would come back. They had simply miscounted what 12 years would do. I arrived at Convocation Hall on the morning of the session and presented credentials to the floor secretary. The hall itself is built for commercial dominance the way other chambers are built for war. Long, low ceilings, lit by strips of amber industrial light, with the cartel block seated in a curved arc across a raised platform at the far end. 14 member houses, each with their delegations in tiered rows behind them. The human table sat at floor level, which was by design. Looking up at the cartel was not accidental. Every angle of the room had been drawn to make you feel like a debtor. I sat down. My 2 aides sat beside me. We set nothing on the table. We carried no documents. We had brought nothing to sign. The session chair, a Merath Factor General named Soth Cavarel, called the convocation to order. Cavarel was the kind of official who had been in his chair long enough that he no longer actually looked at the faces across the floor. He looked at the register. He looked at his deputies. He looked at the amber lights reflecting off the polished stone of the platform edge. 12 years of unopposed sessions had given him that particular confidence of a man who expects the room to comply before he asks. He opened the register. He read Earth's name. The room waited for the acknowledgment. I said nothing. There is a specific texture to silence in a chamber like that one, a room built for the sound of commerce. The scratch of pens and the murmur of clauses and the low, satisfied noise of an agreement settling. When the sound it expects does not come, the room does not simply go quiet, it goes wrong. A session secretary shifted in her seat. One of the junior factor delegates leaned slightly toward the deputy beside him. Cavarel's gaze, which had been aimed at the middle distance, came down and found my face, for what I believe was the first time since I had entered the hall. He read the name again. I kept my eyes level and my hands flat on the table and did not speak. Cavarel set the register down. He said, "In the flat, bureaucratic register of a man who has never had to raise his voice to obtain compliance, that the acknowledgment was required under the Merath Compact, Article 14, and that the Earth delegation's failure to render it would constitute a continuation of the dormant account status, with accumulated penalties now accrued to a figure he named. It was a large figure. It was meant to be a large figure. It had been growing. I understood for 12 years on the assumption that we would eventually feel its weight. I said nothing. The silence this time lasted long enough that Cavarel's senior deputy, a Merath Factor second named Drell, pulled up his own data terminal and began running a search. I watched his hand stop moving. I watched him read whatever the terminal had returned. I watched him read it again. He touched Cavarel's arm. Cavarel did not look at him immediately. He was still looking at me, still working through the logic of a debtor who had come to the table and then declined to acknowledge the debt. When Drell touched his arm a second time, Cavarel looked down at the terminal. He read it. He looked up at me. He read it again. The amber lights in Convocation Hall are fixed. They do not flicker. The Merath Cartel built their halls for stability, for permanence, for the impression of an authority that does not shift. What shifted was the room's temperature. Not physically, but in the way that a room of 14 factor houses and their combined delegations can change when the senior factor general's face changes. Cavarel's face had changed. He was looking at me the way a man looks at something he thought he recognized, and has just realized he does not. What the terminal had returned, I later understood, was the updated trade registry for Earth-affiliated entities, the one my government had been filing with the Neutral Arbitration Bureau, which the cartel had never consulted because they had not thought it necessary. We had not been dormant. We had been building. 12 years of bilateral agreements with 6 species outside the cartel's compact, manufacturing consortium in the second sector, a mutual defense framework with the Vethrani Assembly that had been quietly finalized the prior season, and a combined economic output that had, at some point in the last 18 months, exceeded the cartel's third-largest Memserver's house by a margin. Caveral's terminal was now displaying in figures that did not improve with rereading. We had not come back to the table out of hunger. We had come back because we wanted the record to show that we had come back, that we had sat in this hall, on this floor, at this level, and had listened to our name read from their list, and had said nothing. Cavarel asked his deputy a question in low Merath that I do not speak, but I had been briefed on enough commercial Merath to understand the words for archive, current, and confirmed. Drell answered in a single syllable. There was a pause. Cavarel asked another question. Drell answered it. The factor second, at the far end of the block's left wing, stood up halfway, and then appeared to reconsider and sat back down. Cavarel looked at me for a long time. He had the look of a man reviewing a document he had signed years ago, and finding on this reading clause he had missed. I reached into the interior pocket of my coat and placed a single folded sheet on the table in front of me. I did not open it. I did not slide it forward. I set it down and left my hand beside it, and then I folded my hands and waited. Cavarel asked, in the trade common that all parties used for official record, what the document was. I told him it was as our updated classification request with the Neutral Arbitration Bureau. Earth was formally petitioning to be reclassified from dormant account to independent trading sovereign, effective from the date of this session. He asked if we were withdrawing our petition for reinstatement under the compact. I told him we had not filed a petition for reinstatement. We had filed as notification of intent. The difference, I said, was in Article 9, the clause that governed the rights of independent sovereigns to notify the convocation of their status without requesting the convocation's permission to hold it. Article 9 had been written for member houses, leaving the compact. No one had thought to apply it in the other direction. Cavarel was quiet for a moment. Then he asked very carefully, in the tone of a man verifying the load-bearing capacity of a floor he is standing on, whether Earth was prepared to file that reclassification unilaterally. I told him we already had. This session was the notification. I stood up. Aides stood with me. I left the document on the table and walked to the exit. I did not look back at Cavarel. I did not look back at the 14 factor houses in their tiered rows. I had looked at them long enough. Behind me, as I reached the threshold, I heard Drell say something in rapid Merath, the word for review, and then the word for everything, and then a third word I recognized because Ambassador Voss had drilled it into me years ago as the word the cartel reserved for liabilities they had not accounted for. The door closed on whatever came after that. We had sat in their hall. We had heard our name read from their list. We had answered with nothing. And the answer had been enough. The cartel spent the next 4 months reviewing the Arbitration Bureau filings. They found them correct. They found them complete. They found that we had not missed a clause, had not left an opening, had not given them a mechanism to reclassify us back. The reclassification was confirmed by the Bureau on the 98th day. Cavarel sent a formal communique requesting a new session. We set a date. We named our terms. We did not negotiate the terms. We sent them, and we waited. And the cartel signed them in the 3rd week of the following month. I have the signed instrument in a frame on the wall of my office. Because it is a trophy. Because it is a record. And because the record shows that on the day the Merath Cartel opened their register and read our name expecting a word from us, we gave them silence, and the silence was the only thing they ever needed to hear.